Kingston, Jamaica, March 15, 1978. National Stadium was packed. 35,000 people had come to see Bob Marley perform. The air was thick with heat, anticipation, and the smell of jerk chicken from vendors outside. This wasn't just a concert. In Jamaica, Bob Marley concerts were spiritual gatherings, moments when the entire nation came together through music. If you love discovering the untold stories behind music history's most incredible moments, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Hit that notification bell because we uncover the hidden gems that shaped the legends we know today. Bob was 33 years old at the height of his powers. The Exodus album had made him an international star, but here in Jamaica, he was more than a star. He was a prophet, a voice, a symbol of resistance and hope. In the front row, pressed against the barrier, stood a teenage girl. Her name was Sarah Mitchell. She was 16 years old, wearing a yellow dress, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. Her mother, Grace, stood beside her, one protective hand on her daughter's shoulder. Sarah was completely deaf. She had been born without hearing, never heard a single sound in her entire life. No voices, no laughter, no music, nothing. But Sarah loved Bob Marley. People thought she was crazy. "How can you love music if you can't hear it?" they asked. But Sarah would place her hands on the radio speakers when Bob's songs played. She would feel the vibrations. She would watch her mother's face, see the joy and peace that came over her when Three Little Birds played. She knew that music was more than sound. Music was feeling. Music was energy. Music was connection. For months, Sarah had begged her mother to take her to a Bob Marley concert. "I want to feel him sing," she wrote in her notebook. "I want to be close to the music." Grace was reluctant. Concerts were loud, chaotic, crowded. How would Sarah navigate that world? But Sarah was insistent, and finally, Grace agreed. They bought tickets, front row, as close to the stage as possible. Now, standing in that massive crowd, Sarah felt overwhelmed. The ground beneath her feet was shaking. She could feel vibrations through her whole body. Thousands of people pressed around her, their mouths moving, their faces animated. She couldn't hear them, but she could feel their energy. The lights went down. The crowd erupted. Sarah felt the vibration intensify, traveling up through her legs, into her chest. Bob Marley walked onto the stage. Sarah had seen his picture. She'd watched videos of his performances with the sound off, studying his movements, his expressions. But seeing him in person was different. Even from a distance, even without hearing a single note, Sarah felt something shift inside her. Bob picked up his guitar. His fingers moved across the strings. Sarah couldn't hear the notes, but she felt them. The vibrations traveled through the air, through the ground, into her body. Bob began to sing. Sarah watched his mouth move, watched his head tilt back, watched his entire body become an instrument. Around her, people were swaying, dancing, singing along. She couldn't hear their voices, but she could feel their unity. Tears started rolling down Sarah's cheeks. She didn't know why she was crying. She wasn't sad. She was feeling something she'd never felt before, something bigger than herself. Grace noticed her daughter crying and pulled her close. "Are you okay?" she mouthed. Sarah nodded. "I feel it, Mama. I feel the music." Bob was performing "No Woman, No Cry." It was one of Sarah's favorite songs, even though she'd never heard it. She knew it from the vibrations, from watching people's reactions, from the way her mother's eyes would close peacefully when it played. Bob was singing to the crowd, his eyes moving across the thousands of faces, and then his gaze landed on the front row. On a young girl in a yellow dress, tears streaming down her face. Her hands pressed against the barrier, her eyes closed, swaying to a rhythm she couldn't hear. Something about her was different. Bob couldn't explain it, but he felt it. The way she moved wasn't quite synchronized with the music. She was slightly offbeat, but not in a bad way. In a way that suggested she was following something internal, something felt rather than heard. Bob continued singing, but he kept watching her. And then he noticed the woman beside the girl was signing. Not casual hand movements, but American Sign Language. The girl's eyes were closed, so she wasn't seeing the signs, but the woman was translating anyway. Bob realized the girl was deaf, a deaf girl in the front row of his concert, crying, swaying, feeling music she couldn't hear. Bob was moved in a way he couldn't fully explain. Here was proof of something he'd always believed. Music transcended physical senses. Music was spiritual. Music was universal. Bob finished No Woman, No Cry and transitioned into Exodus, but his mind was on that girl. Halfway through the song, Bob made a decision. He stopped playing, held up his hand. The band gradually went silent, confused. 35,000 people went quiet, wondering what was happening. Bob walked to the edge of the stage. He pointed to Sarah. "You," he said into the microphone. "The girl in the yellow dress." Sarah's eyes opened. People around her were pointing at her. Her mother was tapping her shoulder urgently. Sarah looked up at the stage and saw Bob Marley pointing directly at her. Her heart stopped. Bob gestured for her to come to the stage. Security looked confused but began moving to help her up. Sarah shook her head. She was terrified. What was happening? Why was he calling her? Grace signed to her. "He wants you on stage. Go." "I can't," Sarah signed back. "I can't hear. What if he asks me something?" "Go," Grace signed firmly. "This is your moment." Security guards helped lift Sarah onto the stage. Her legs were shaking. Bob Marley walked toward her, the most famous man in Jamaica, walking toward her with his guitar. Bob knelt down so he was at eye level with Sarah. He could see the fear in her eyes, but also something else. Hope, wonder, trust. Bob pointed to his own ears, then to Sarah, and made a gesture that clearly asked, "You can't hear?" Sarah shook her head. "No," she mouthed. Bob smiled, a warm, gentle smile that said everything was okay. He stood up and turned to the crowd. "This sister," Bob said into the microphone, "she can't hear the music, but she feels it. And tonight, I want her to feel it even more." The crowd erupted in applause. Sarah couldn't hear it, but she felt the vibration of 35,000 people cheering. Bob took Sarah's hand. It was gentle, respectful. He placed her palm flat against his chest, right over his heart. Sarah's eyes widened. She could feel his heartbeat, strong, steady, alive. Then Bob began to hum. No words, just a melody. The opening notes of Three Little Birds. Sarah felt the vibration in Bob's chest. She felt his vocal cords working, felt the sound resonating through his body and into her hand. For the first time in her life, Sarah was hearing music directly from its source. Not through speakers or floors or walls, but from the body of the musician creating it. Tears streamed down her face. Bob transitioned from humming to singing, still holding Sarah's hand to his chest. "Don't worry about a thing, 'cause every little thing gonna be all right." Sarah was sobbing now, her whole body shaking, but not from sadness, from overwhelming joy. Bob then did something even more extraordinary. He took Sarah's hand and placed it on his guitar, right on the body of the instrument, where the sound resonated most strongly. He began to play. Sarah felt every note, every strum, every vibration. The guitar was alive in her hand. She could feel the music being born, feel it traveling from Bob's fingers, through the strings, into the wood, into her palm, up her arm, into her heart. Bob played the entire song with Sarah's hand on his guitar. The crowd watched in complete silence, many of them crying. This wasn't a performance anymore. This was something sacred. When the song ended, Bob embraced Sarah. A real embrace, like a father hugging a daughter. Bob walked Sarah back to the edge of the stage. Before she climbed down, he took off one of his bracelets, a simple woven band he'd worn for years, and tied it around her wrist. Sarah returned to her mother's arms, shaking, transformed, unable to stop crying. Grace held her daughter, both of them weeping. Bob returned to the microphone. "Music is not just sound," he told the crowd. "Music is vibration, energy, spirit. That sister just taught me something tonight. You don't need to hear music to feel music. You just need to open your heart." The concert continued for another hour. But for Sarah, everything had already happened. Her life had changed in those 10 minutes on stage with Bob Marley. The next day, the story was everywhere. Bob Marley stops concert for deaf girl. Newspapers ran photos of Bob with his hand guiding Sarah's to his guitar. But Sarah didn't care about the publicity. She kept Bob's bracelet on her wrist and never took it off. In the weeks after the concert, something unexpected happened. Sarah started speaking, not perfectly, not clearly, but speaking. For 16 years, she'd been completely silent, but something about feeling Bob's voice, feeling the vibrations of words in his chest, had awakened something in her. Doctors were baffled. "There's no medical explanation," they said. But Grace understood. Music had reached into Sarah's silence and pulled out her voice. Sarah wrote Bob a letter. "Dear Bob, you gave me music. I gave you nothing. But I promise I will spend my life sharing what you taught me. That barriers are only barriers if we believe them. Thank you for seeing me. Love, Sarah." 3 months later, Sarah received a package. Inside was a cassette tape and a note, handwritten. "Sarah, you gave me everything. You reminded me why I make music. This tape is for you. Play it loud, feel it. The vibrations are my voice telling you, you are powerful, you are loved, you are music. Bob." The cassette was a private recording. Bob singing "Three Little Birds." Acoustically, just his voice and guitar, recorded specially for Sarah. In 1981, when Bob Marley died, Sarah was 19 years old. She was devastated. She attended his memorial service in Kingston, wearing his bracelet, crying silently. At the service, Sarah made a decision. She would dedicate her life to teaching others what Bob had taught her. Sarah went to university, studied education and music therapy. In 1985, she founded the Marley Center for Deaf Arts in Kingston, a place where deaf children could learn music, not through hearing, but through feeling, through vibration, through instruments they could touch. Sarah became an advocate. She gave speeches at schools, conferences, events around the world, always wearing Bob's bracelet, always telling the story of that night at National Stadium. "Bob Marley didn't give me hearing," Sarah would tell audiences. "He gave me something better. He gave me proof that I was already whole, that music was already mine. I just needed someone to show me how to find it." The Marley Center grew. Hundreds of deaf children passed through its doors. They learned to play drums by feeling the vibrations. They learned to dance by watching visual cues. They learned that music belonged to them. In 2003, Sarah was invited to speak at a global music education conference in London. She was 41 years old now, a respected educator, a published author, a voice for the deaf community worldwide. During her speech, she held up her wrist, showing the now faded bracelet Bob had given her 25 years earlier. "This bracelet is falling apart," she told the audience. "The threads are weak, the colors are gone, but I will never take it off, because it reminds me of the night Bob Marley taught me the most important lesson of my life. Music is not something you hear. Music is something you are." Today, the Marley Center for Deaf Arts serves over 500 students annually. On the wall in the entrance is a photograph. Bob Marley on stage, kneeling beside a teenage girl in a yellow dress, her hand on his guitar. Both of them smiling, both of them crying. Underneath is a quote from Bob: "Music lives in the heart, not in the ears." And beside it, Sarah added her own words: "He showed me I could feel music. I've spent my life showing others they can too." That's how you honor a gift. You share it. If this incredible story moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. Share this video with someone who's ever felt limited by their circumstances. Have you ever experienced music in an unexpected way? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to ring that notification bell for more untold stories about the moments when music proved it has no boundaries.